You'd be surprised how fast trust drains. Faster than your bank account, actually. One minute, I was refreshing my mobile app like I always did after payday. Nothing special. Just making sure everything hit. And then I saw it. A single transfer. $9,000. Gone. No label. No description. Just an anonymous withdrawal from my savings account. At first, I thought it was fraud. I almost clicked the little report issue button. But something in me hesitated. It was too familiar, too close. So I called my mom. She picked up, cheerful as ever. My mom said, "Hi, sweetheart. Everything okay?" I asked, "Did you take money from my account?" There was a pause, barely a second, but it was enough. Then my mom said, "Oh, that. Yes, we meant to tell you. It was for something important." I asked, "What exactly was it for?" My mom replied, "Well, your sister needed a down payment. For her car." I blinked, still staring at the screen. I asked again, slower this time. "You used my savings to buy her a car?" My mom said, "Yes, her Tesla, the white one she's been dreaming about." I froze. Then I opened Instagram. There she was, my sister, standing in front of a shiny white Tesla, flashing a peace sign captioned, "Dreams really do come true. Manifested this one." No mention of where the money came from. No tag, no thank you. Just likes, comments, and fake humility. And suddenly it all made sense. The missing money, the timing, the sudden smug energy in her stories the past few days. I stared at her smile and felt like the floor dropped from beneath me. All those years, working overtime, skipping dinners out, clipping coupons, splitting haircuts into 2 payments. All those months where I paid their utility bills, helped cover the mortgage when Dad was between jobs, bought Mom her medication, and even loaned my sister gas money. Money she never once paid back. All those years, and they never touched my savings. Until now. I called my dad. He answered, upbeat like always. My dad said, "You're up early." "Everything all right?" I asked. "Did you approve the transfer from my account?" My dad chuckled and said, "Of course. She really needed it." I said, "That was my house fund." My dad replied, "You've got that great job. You're not hurting." I asked, "So you thought it was okay to just take it?" My dad said, "If we asked, you'd probably say no. And it's still in the family, right?" I said, "That money was for my future." My dad replied, "She's struggling." "You're not. You've always been the strong one." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Then I sat on the floor of my apartment, just staring. $9,000. 2 years of effort, gone in a few seconds. Not even a heads up, and not a single thank you. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, watching headlights crawl across my ceiling, and memories hit me like punches to the ribs. I remembered my senior year of high school, when I gave up the college I really wanted to attend because my parents said they couldn't afford out-of-state tuition. I remembered freshman year sending money home from my campus job because the fridge had broken and they were in crisis. I remembered taking out an extra loan so they wouldn't have to sell the family car. I remembered missing my best friend's wedding because my sister needed a deposit for a new apartment, and I couldn't afford both. Every time they said the same thing. "You're part of the team. We couldn't do this without you. You're the responsible one. You're the strong one." And I believed them. I thought that meant I mattered. But what they really meant was, "You're useful." They only loved me when I was paying for things, when I was quiet, grateful, small. It wasn't just the money. It was the years of choices built on lies, the years of shrinking myself so they could stretch. The day after the Tesla post, I went over to their house. I rang the bell and waited. My mom answered, smiling like nothing was wrong. My mom said, "Come in." We just made coffee. I walked straight to the kitchen. My sister was at the table scrolling on her phone. She looked up, half interested. My sister said, "Oh, you saw the car?" I said, "I saw the post." She smirked. My sister said, "Jealous?" I said, "I'm angry." She rolled her eyes. My sister said, "It's just money." I turned to my mom. I asked, "Why didn't you even ask?" My mom said, "We knew you'd overreact. You always make everything a big deal." I said, "Because stealing is a big deal." My dad came in from the den. My dad said, "Nobody stole anything. It's still in the family." And she needed it. I asked, "Did you ever think I might need it too?" No one answered. So I turned around, walked out of the kitchen, and didn't look back. I drove home with both hands gripping the wheel, teeth clenched so tight my jaw ached. I didn't cry. Not that night. But the next morning, I called the bank. I closed the shared account, opened a new one, just in my name. I canceled the credit cards they had access to, changed every password, set up a PIN. Then I sat in the silence of my one-bedroom apartment and ate dinner alone. Frozen pizza, the cheap kind. And I told myself out loud, I wasn't part of the team. I was just the wallet, and I would never be again. I didn't storm in. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything or slam doors. I just showed up the next day. Their house was warm with that same sugary cinnamon smell it always had. The kitchen window was open. The white Tesla was parked out front like some smug little trophy. I stood in the doorway for a second. I don't know what I expected. Remorse? Apologies? Instead, my dad waved me in like it was Sunday brunch. My dad said, "Hey kiddo, want some coffee? There's still some in the pot." I didn't move. I asked, "Did you use my savings for her car?" My mom, who was slicing bananas into her oatmeal, didn't even look up. My mom said, "Sweetheart, yes. We didn't think you'd mind. It was for your sister." I repeated it again, slower. I said, "You took my savings without asking and used it for her car?" My dad chuckled. My dad said, "Come on, it's still in the family, isn't it?" Still in the family. Like that made it okay. Like I was overreacting. I said, "It was my account. My name. My work. You never even asked." My mom finally looked up from her bowl. My mom said, "She needed a win, honey. You'll bounce back. You always do." I turned to my sister, who was on the couch scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look at me. I asked, "What did you think when you found out the money came from me?" She shrugged. My sister said, "It's not even a new Tesla. Chill. You act like I bought a yacht." I stared at her. I said, "You didn't buy anything." I did, with my money. She laughed, actually laughed, and tossed her phone aside. My sister said, "You're being so dramatic." That was the moment. The moment where something in me broke. Not like a dish thrown across a wall. More like a rope that had been fraying quietly for years, finally snapping. They weren't sorry. They weren't surprised. They thought it was theirs. They thought I was theirs. A walking, talking emergency fund. And when I wasn't needed anymore, I was a nuisance. I walked past them, into the kitchen. The old linoleum floor creaked under my heels. I leaned against the sink, facing them like a stranger might. Like someone trying to read the energy in a room they didn't belong in. Because that's what it was. I didn't belong here. Not as their child. Not as their daughter. Not even as a guest. Just as a resource, a refillable bank card with a social security number. My mom wiped her hands on a dish towel and tried to soften her tone. My mom said, "We should have talked to you first, I'll admit that, but it's not like you're poor." I said, "That's not the point. You don't get to decide what I'm too rich to care about." My dad shook his head. My dad said, "Look, you've always been the responsible one. You know your sister, she's had it rough." I asked, "How, exactly?" He paused. My dad said, "She's just not like you. You've always had it together. She needed a little lift." I said, "And you decided to steal from me to give it to her." My mom interjected quickly. My mom said, "Don't use that word. It wasn't stealing." I asked, "Would you have done it if it were someone else's account?" "Not mine?" Silence. So I answered for them. I said, "No, because you'd be afraid of jail time. But you weren't afraid of betraying me." My sister rolled her eyes. My sister said, "God, you're exhausting." I turned to her, calm as stone. I said, "And you're entitled." My sister said, "Don't talk to me like that in my house." I blinked. I said, "Your house?" She nodded smugly. My sister said, "Yeah, Mom and Dad said I can stay here as long as I want." I almost laughed. I said, "They told me the same thing, right before they asked me to help cover the mortgage." My mom folded her arms across her chest. My mom said, "Enough of this." "What do you want, a check?" I said, "No. I want the truth." My dad sighed. My dad said, "Fine. We didn't ask because we knew you'd say no, but she needed help, and we thought you'd understand. You've always been mature." I said, "I'm not mature. I'm manipulated." That shut the room up. For the first time, they were all still. I kept going. I said, "You call me strong because I never complain. Because I always say yes. Because I work and save and take care of things. But it's not respect. It's convenience." My mom looked like she might cry, but I didn't flinch. My mom said, "We never meant to hurt you." I said, "You didn't even think about me." And that's worse. That's what stings. Not just the betrayal, but the fact that they did it without hesitation. Like it was normal. Like I was just a line item in a budget they control. I pushed off the sink and walked to the door. My mom followed me halfway. My mom said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Home." My dad said, "Don't be like this." I turned back to face him. I said, "You made your choices. And now I'm making mine." Then I left. I got in my car, my 15-year-old Honda, and sat there for a long time, engine running, hands frozen on the wheel. Then I drove. No music. Just the sound of rubber on pavement and the blood in my ears. That night, I cleared every account, closed all shared cards, called my bank and flagged every point of access they had, set new passwords, changed my emergency contact, told HR to remove them from my benefits. It was brutal, but necessary, because that was the last time they touched anything of mine, ever again. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part they didn't expect. They thought I'd yell, cry, get it out of my system, and then go back to being their unpaid assistant/safety net. But I didn't. I stopped paying the gas bill first. Then the mortgage support I'd been quietly contributing to for 3 years. Then the grocery orders I used to schedule every Sunday night. Gone. Just gone. I didn't explain, didn't announce it. I just let the silence do the talking. At first, there was nothing, a few missed calls, some passive-aggressive texts. "You okay? Haven't heard from you. Need help logging into the joint account. Let me know." Then came the bills. My mom called one morning at 6:45 a.m. My mom said, "The lights are out. Did the auto payment bounce?" I answered, "I turned it off. It was in my name." She paused, then said it slower, like I must have misunderstood something. My mom said, "But we need that, honey. The fridge is off. The food's going bad." I said, "Then you'll need to pay it." My mom said, "But you always handle that. We don't know what to do without you." I said, "You'll figure it out." She sighed. I could hear drawers opening, paper rustling in the background. My mom said, "We're still family, aren't we?" I said, "Family doesn't steal futures." Then I hung up. The next week, my dad left me a voicemail. He always used voicemails when he was trying to sound calm and fatherly. My dad said, "Look, I get that you're hurt, but don't throw everything away over a misunderstanding. You're still part of this family." I didn't respond. Instead, I canceled the Hulu subscription they'd been using, and the Netflix account. Then the phone line they'd piggybacked on for 10 years. All gone. It was mine. And now it was closed. I opened a new checking account at a bank they'd never heard of, opened a P.O. box, started transferring my job's direct deposit. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was moving on. Then came my sister. She didn't call. She didn't text. She showed up, banged on the door of my apartment like she owned the building. When I opened it, she didn't even wait for an invite. She stomped in wearing yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, despite it being overcast and 5 p.m. My sister said, "What the hell is your problem?" I stood there, calm, tired, but grounded. I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You canceled everything. Mom's crying, Dad's freaking out, you're ruining our lives." I said, "No. I'm just removing myself from the equation." She waved her arms like that explained everything. My sister said, "We're a unit. We've always helped each other." I asked, "When have you ever helped me?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "That's not fair. I'm your sister." I said, "And I'm not your ATM." She scoffed. My sister said, "You're being selfish, dramatic, like always." I said, "I've been paying for your drama for years. I'm done." She pointed toward the window, toward the street. My sister said, "So you're gonna punish us? Just sit in here, high and mighty, while we struggle?" I said, "I sat in silence while you took from me." That was punishment. This is peace. She started pacing, fast and shallow, like she was trying to manufacture a tantrum. My sister said, "I can't believe you." "Over a car? Over some money?" I said, "It wasn't the car. It was the lie, the entitlement, the way no one even asked." My sister stopped and looked me dead in the eye. My sister said, "You've changed." I said, "No. You just never bothered to get to know me when I wasn't paying for things." She left after that. No goodbye, no door closed gently. Just a slam, echoing down the hallway like a warning shot. But I didn't flinch. I finished my tea, opened my laptop, and booked a moving truck. I found a studio apartment across town, smaller, quieter, tucked behind a row of trees and a gated lot. Not fancy, but it was mine. The walls were blank, the floor creaked, but the key in my hand didn't come with guilt. And that was new. That first night, I slept with nothing but a mattress on the floor and a box for a nightstand. No framed pictures, no spare towels, just a lamp, a mug of tea, and the deepest sleep I'd had in years. No buzzing phones, no Venmo requests, no panic texts, just silence. And in that silence, I bloomed. I started journaling again, picked up freelance design gigs on the side, opened an IRA account, signed up for a financial coaching group online. And every time my phone buzzed, I asked myself, do I want to answer this? Or do I feel obligated? If the answer was obligated, I hit mute. Every time. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I wasn't out for revenge. I was trying to remember what my life felt like, before it got hijacked by guilt and obligation and constant overdraft fees. A few weeks later, I got an email from my dad. Subject line: "We need to talk." I didn't open it. I just archived it and went back to work. Because I knew what it would say, and I wasn't interested. They could spin it however they wanted. Call it a tantrum. Call it selfish. They were free to name it whatever helped them sleep at night. But I had a name for it too. I called it freedom. Broke looks different when it's on your own terms. No one tells you that. They show you the highlight reels, luxury, success, revenge. But real peace? It's waking up in a quiet studio with no money, no furniture, and no debt hanging over your head like a threat. The morning sun came through my blinds like a quiet blessing. No notifications, no calls, no guilt. Just the sound of my own breath, steady and mine. I got dressed in the same 2 pairs of slacks I rotated through and took the bus to work, because the Honda finally gave out on me after sputtering through one last grocery run. It was humbling, but also clarifying. My job was nothing glamorous. Just a junior admin role at a startup that sold ergonomic keyboards. The kind of place where people wore sneakers with their slacks and said things like asynchronous culture without irony. But I liked it. It was quiet, predictable. My desk faced a window. My boss remembered my name. No one asked me for money. And my coworker Marcus was the kind of guy who noticed things. Not in a creepy way, just human. One morning, I brought in a homemade sandwich and sat at the lunch table, tired but oddly serene. Marcus sat across from me, chewing a protein bar like it owed him something. Marcus said, "You're glowing." I blinked. I said, "I'm broke." Marcus grinned and said, "Yeah, but glowing. Broke, but glowing." I laughed. A real laugh. He didn't know the half of it, but it felt good to be seen, without being used. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. The voice on the other end was clipped, professional. The caller said, "Hello, this is Andrea with Tesla Financial. Is this name?" I confirmed it was me. She continued. Andrea said, "We've been trying to reach you about a delinquent account. You are listed as the primary borrower on a 2021 Model 3. Payments have not been made for the past 3 months." I said, "Excuse me?" Andrea said, "There's an outstanding balance and repossession has been initiated. If we do not receive payment or communication within 72 hours, the vehicle will be impounded." I asked, "Where is the car now?" Andrea said, "Currently located at dealership impound." "Do you wish to settle the account?" I paused. I wasn't ready. Not emotionally, not financially. But this wasn't just a car. It was a symbol. A loose thread in the quilt of lies I'd let my family stitch around me. I said, "Yes, I'd like to settle the account." Andrea transferred me. I spoke to a manager, then a second manager. They confirmed everything. The loan was in my name. My sister had never made a single payment herself. And now the car was one call away from being sold at auction, with the remainder of the balance still on my credit. I asked, "What happens if I pay off the full balance today?" The manager said, "You'll own the car outright. We can send you the title and arrange pickup within 24 hours. I hung up and sat in silence for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed. Then I called a lawyer. Not a flashy one, just a local firm that specialized in asset recovery and family law. I walked in with a file folder full of documents and a shaking hand. The lawyer, a woman named Teresa, looked over the contract and nodded. Teresa said, "It's legally yours. They used your credit, your name. That gives you full claim." I asked, "What do I need to do to protect myself?" Teresa said, "Pay it off. Take possession. And notify them in writing that any future use without your permission will be reported as theft." So I did. I emptied my emergency fund, called in a favor from a freelance client who owed me for 3 rush jobs, even sold a piece of furniture I'd inherited years ago from my grandfather. And then, with a final click, I transferred the funds. The debt was gone, and the car, mine. I got the call the next day. The vehicle was ready for pickup. It was waiting in a back lot behind a dealership on the other side of town, parked between 2 dusty pickup trucks, battery half dead, paint still gleaming under a coat of pollen. The employee handed me the keys like it was any other day. But it wasn't. This was the day I stopped being the victim of the story. I slid into the driver's seat. Leather. Still smelled new. There was a half-empty energy drink in the cup holder and a pink hoodie in the back seat. I left them there. I didn't need to erase her. I just needed to reclaim me. As I pulled out of the lot, I saw the employee watching me. He waved. I didn't wave back. I just drove. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Freedom. Not just from the debt, but from the narrative. The lie. The idea that I owed anyone my silence, my patience, or my bank account just because we shared blood. That night, I parked the Tesla in the secured lot behind my apartment. Took a picture, not for Instagram, just for me. And I whispered out loud, I cleaned up the mess so I could claim what was already mine. Then I went upstairs, made dinner, and slept through the night. They didn't see me pull in at first. The Tesla was too quiet, just a soft electric whisper as I rolled down the familiar street. My parents' house sat in its usual place, chipped shutters, overgrown rose bushes, the faded wreath still on the door from some forgotten holiday. I pulled into the driveway like a ghost returning to a place I used to haunt. And then the front door flew open. My mom came out first, apron still on, like she'd just stepped away from stirring something on the stove. Her eyes went wide. A hand flew to her mouth. My mom said, "Oh my God." She brought it back. Behind her, my dad appeared. Slower, cautious, but with a look I knew too well. Relief. Control sliding back into his hands, like everything was going to fall into place again. My sister came out last, still in that same pink hoodie I'd found in the car. She stepped off the porch and practically jogged toward me. My sister said, "You brought it back?" I left the engine running. I sat there a moment, hands on the wheel, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. Then I stepped out. I wasn't dressed fancy, no makeup, just jeans and a black jacket zipped up against the wind. But I stood taller than I ever had before. My mom stepped forward, smiling wide like she was welcoming back a prodigal daughter. My mom said, "We knew you'd forgive us. We were just waiting for you to cool off." I took one step closer but didn't meet her eyes. I said, "I didn't come to return it." They froze. I looked at my sister directly. I said, "I came to show you what I reclaimed." My sister's smile dropped. My sister said, "You stole it." I laughed, once sharp and humorless. I said, "You can't steal what you already own." My dad stepped forward then, hands raised like he was trying to mediate a hostage situation. My dad said, "Let's not escalate things. This is still family business." I said, "That business closed. You made sure of it." My mom's eyes went glossy, but I didn't soften. Not this time. My mom said, "You didn't have to be so cold. You could have just talked to us." I said, "I did. You just didn't listen." My sister scoffed. My sister said, "You're seriously going to drive off like some dramatic movie villain?" I said, "No. Just someone who finally learned to stop apologizing for being used." She laughed bitterly. My sister said, "You're making a scene." I said, "No. I'm making a point." She crossed her arms. My sister said, "You've changed." I nodded. I said, "Thank you." Then I walked back to the car. I opened the door. But before I stepped in, I turned back one last time. I said, "This was never about the car. It was about being invisible, being useful but never loved, valued but never seen." I looked at all three of them standing there, on that cracked driveway, under the soft hum of the idling engine. I said, "So here's your scene. Here's your message." I got in, rolled the windows down, turned the music up, something loud, defiant, mine. As I pulled out, my sister shouted after me. My sister said, "This isn't over." But I didn't even look back. Not once, because they thought I was returning the car. But I was returning the message. I'm done. I knew they'd react. I just didn't know how far they'd go. It started with a post. Just a single paragraph, sandwiched between brunch selfies and astrology memes on my sister's Instagram. "Imagine letting money turn you into a monster. My sister stole my car, cut off our family, and pretends she's a victim. Some people really don't understand loyalty." There it was. A whole novel of betrayal reduced to a self-righteous caption and a carefully filtered photo. At first, I ignored it. Let her play her part. Let them all play. I was done performing. But the post caught fire. Her followers, mostly high school friends, bored coworkers, and those MLM boss babes she followed, lit up the comments section. "OMG, I'm so sorry you're going through this. That's disgusting. Blood should mean something. You deserve better. She'll regret it. She posted it on Facebook, too, with an even more dramatic version. Some people change when they taste a little freedom. My sister cut off her family and claimed my car. Guess generosity has an expiration date. And people ate it up. Even some extended family joined in. My aunt commented, "We always knew Angela had a cold streak." Someone else chimed in, "She's always acted like the martyr." I stayed silent. I didn't respond. Didn't share receipts. Didn't drag anyone. Because I knew something they didn't. You can control the story, or the truth. Never both. And the truth? Well, the truth always finds its moment. It happened on a Wednesday. I was home, scrolling past headlines I couldn't afford to click when a notification pinged at the top of my screen. A tag. I clicked. It was my sister's original post, but now the top comment had changed. Pinned. Viral. Glowing like a match in a haystack. It was from Mrs. Gonzalez. Mrs. Gonzalez had lived across the street from my parents for as long as I could remember. She'd watched me grow up, brought over hot cocoa during storms, and slipped me cookies even after I moved out. Her profile picture was just a garden gnome and a tomato plant. Her comment said, "I was there," that Tesla was bought with Angela's money. Her parents took it without asking. Her sister knew. I saw the bills come in. I saw her cry. Don't twist the story. Just like that, everything shifted. People started asking questions. Someone replied, "Wait, is this true?" Another said, "Details? This doesn't match the vibe." Then came the screenshots. People pulled up old tweets of my sister bragging about manifesting the car. Someone found a tagged photo of my mom holding the keys with a caption, "When your other kid makes it happen." The comments turned fast. One person wrote, "So she paid for it and got shamed for taking it back?" Another added, "This isn't a monster. This is someone setting boundaries." Then a blogger picked it up. A small, independent blog about financial abuse and adult children reclaiming autonomy. They messaged me privately. The blogger said, "Hi, Angela. We'd love to feature your story. No pressure. Just want to highlight your strength." I was hesitant, but I said yes. Not for revenge. For the thousands of people like me who think they're crazy just because they said no for the first time. The post went up the following week. The Tesla wasn't the problem. It was the pattern. Angela's story of boundaries and betrayal. No pictures of me, just my words, my truth. It wasn't a sensation. It was a mirror. People saw themselves in it. Comments poured in. "This hit me in the chest. Thank you, Angela." I'm going through the same thing with my dad. I feel less alone. I didn't know financial abuse could look like that. Now I do. My sister posted again, this time with a Bible quote and some vague spiritual caption about forgiveness being divine. But the damage was done. Not to me, to the lie. The spotlight wasn't on her anymore. It was on us, the quiet ones, the givers, the ones who get left behind and then blamed when we finally walk away. And through it all, I said nothing, because I didn't need to. They tried to shame me, but I stopped playing silent, and the world listened. Selling the car was the easy part. What came after, that was the real freedom. I'd thought about it for weeks. Let the keys sit in a bowl by the door, like they were waiting for a better answer. But every time I looked at that car, I saw them. The entitlement, the gaslighting, the coldness. So I listed it. No ceremony, no second guessing. A dealer in town offered a fair price. A private buyer might have paid more, but I didn't care. I just wanted it gone. Gone from my credit. Gone from my mind. Gone from my story. The dealer shook my hand after inspecting it. The dealer said, "You sure you want to let this beauty go?" "Barely used. Still smells new." I said, "I'm sure." He said, "We've got some trade-in options if you're in the market." I nodded. I said, "Something hybrid. Modest, paid in full. He raised an eyebrow. The dealer said, "Not many people walk in with a cashier's check these days." I smiled. I said, "I'm not most people anymore." I drove off that afternoon in a soft gray hybrid. No bells, no whistles, just quiet hum and good brakes. And peace. That night, I opened my laptop and made a donation. Every penny from the Tesla sale went to a local women's shelter, the kind that gives people like me a second chance at building their own beginning. I didn't post about it, didn't share a receipt, didn't tag a cause. I just clicked confirm and exhaled. 2 weeks later, I turned 28. No balloons, no fireworks, just a dinner table and the right people sitting around it. Marcus brought lemon cake. He'd baked it himself and apologized for the uneven frosting. Marcus said, "I swear it tastes better than it looks." I said, "That's how I feel most days." We both laughed. Mrs. Gonzalez came too. She wore a blue scarf and handed me a tiny wrapped box with no card. Inside was a necklace, just a small silver key on a chain. Mrs. Gonzalez said, "For every locked door you've walked through." I hugged her tighter than I'd meant to. We sat under string lights on the back patio of my apartment complex, sipping wine out of mismatched glasses and telling stories that didn't end in betrayal. No one asked me for money. No one looked at me like I owed them something. They just saw me. Fully. And finally. Near the end of the night, Marcus raised a glass. Marcus said, "To Angela, who bought herself back." Everyone cheered, even me. And later, as I stood at the sink rinsing plates, Marcus leaned against the counter beside me. Marcus said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah. Actually, I'm good." He handed me a towel. Marcus said, "You know, the dealer called it a practical choice." I nodded. I said, "And I called it permanent peace." He smiled. I smiled back. I didn't need a parade, or closure, or even their apology. I'd found something better. Quiet joy, self-worth, and freedom without strings. I went to bed that night with the window cracked open. And in the morning, I drove my little gray car to work, humming to the radio, thinking, they taught me to give until I was empty. But this time, I filled my own tank and drove myself home.